Hi everyone, hope you see and hear me okay. My name is Alexandra Govaruha and I'm a host of today's webinar, Accelerated Change AdTech. And while some attendees are joining us, I'd like to ask you to write your company or name or business domain and your role, so we could better understand who is here today. Few words about myself. I'm responsible for international PR at Sigma Software, the Swedish-Ukrainian IT consulting company, which is holding this webinar today. And I'm a co-founder of the biggest startup community in Ukraine, UTF Tech Tribe. So what is this webinar about and why are we doing it? In early April, when everybody realized that the lockdown is not just for a few weeks, we gathered with our team and discussed how we could be closer to our partners and clients during this challenging period. We came up with an idea of informal webinars where we could cheer up each other, share knowledge and tech expertise. So that is how Sigma Software, together with partners and friends all over the world, launched a series of webinars for the global tech community in order to overcome the challenges together. Here, I should say thank you to our partners and co-organizers. ZAG, an independent growth consultancy born inside one of the world's most creative agencies, BBH. ZAG gets to the heart of what makes your brand different, bringing it to life in ways that build meaningful customer connections. And Sigma Software Labs, a platform for boosting startups empowered by Sigma Software, business connections, and tech expertise. Thank you, guys. Your engagement is very appreciated. And now I'd like to ask to switch our speakers to switch on your videos and unmute yourself. And let's jump to the webinar rules. So first, each speaker will have up to 3 minutes for a short introduction of the topic. Then we will start a live discussion during which you'll be able to participate in polls. Beware, tapping on one of the suggested answers. If you want to share a comment or discuss some points with other webinars participants, please use the chat button. And afterwards, we will jump to the Q&A session. To ask your question, please tap the button Q&A and on the bottom of the Click Meeting panel and write it down. And we are going to have polls, as I said, asking you some questions. So please tap on one of the suggested answers. So these are the rules. And we are about to start our webinar. And I'm welcoming a moderator of our event, Will Mercer, a venture director at ZAG, the venture arm of global creative agency BBH, where Will manages an early stage investment fund. And he specializes in combining commercial strategy with narrative-based storytelling to help founders land investment, close their first customers, and create sustainable businesses. So, Will, the stage is yours.
So, first of all, a big hello and welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. My name is Will Mercer. I am venture director at ZAG, and Alexandra did a brilliant job of introducing ZAG, so I won't waste any more time. But just a big first, thank you very much to Sigma Software and Sigma Software Labs for hosting this event. Logistics, particularly in a digital age, somehow seem to be more taxing than getting people in a room. So thank you guys for doing a great job. For those of you listening, we have the amazing Kate, who is looking after all the technology behind the scenes. So if you have questions, chuck them into the chat box. Let's keep the questions going in real time. We will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end, but in the meantime, please do just send over questions as and when you get them. We will, as Alexandra mentioned, we will be asking a number of survey questions during the event. So to test that process, I think you've already seen one, but Kate, if we could just reload the opening survey, but it would really help us if we understood who was dialing in today and on the call so that our panelists can tailor their answers towards your collective backgrounds. So, Kate, could we load the survey for who we have in the room. Here we go. Let's try and see if we can. Okay, let's. Aha. I think, are we loading? Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, it seems that I think I might have a small lag despite our best attempts to test in advance. Brilliant. So we had five answers. Brilliant. Thank you. So it looks like we have a mixed bag, but a predominantly founder centric. I'm guessing if a couple of the panelists answered, that's probably skewed the results in a good way. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, guys. Really appreciated. Seeing as there seems to be a slight lag at my end, apologies for that. It would be best for me to just hand over to the panelists to introduce themselves and just give you a bit of a brief background before we get stuck into the questions. So yeah, if we could start in order of Johan, Sam, and then Andreas.
Sure. The natural step there, you being totally frozen. So, hi everyone. I'm Johan Liljelund. I'm CTO and Executive Vice President of Doughnuts. Doughnuts is a software development company in the business of self-service and automation. The company was founded in 2013 by two guys from the southern part of Sweden, Istvan and Pio. We develop, deliver self-service advertising platforms to some of the world's largest media owners. I would say the first market-ready platform was launched by us 2016. The company has been working with Sigma Software as a development partner from start. We are still doing this. We have, I would say, plus 40 people fully employed on Sigma side. All in all, Doughnuts today, we have around 80 plus people, headquartered in Stockholm, sales office in London, New York. So we are still a startup, but we are slowly entering this some sort of the step of becoming a bit bigger than just being a startup company. We are today the global leader when it comes to self-service advertising platforms. Our main focus has been targeting only the really top media owners globally. So we work with everything from TripAdvisor to Bloomberg Media to Hearst, eBay, Reach PLC. Main markets, I would say UK and US. The niche that we're in is basically sprung from, I would say, two aspects. One aspect is that the media industry, as is, if we talk about traditional publishers, this industry is working as it has been for the last 70 years. They sell ads. You talk to a salesperson. You get 80% discount. There is no self-service concept. If you look at other industries like bank, flight tickets, so forth, these industries have emerged. So the reason for Doughnuts is that we believe that with the drastic change that digital advertising industry is in, with third-party cookies going, there is GDPR, there is data privacy, and now we also have Corona. it has a huge impact on the publishers. I mean, historically, they have had their sales team doing the white glove sales, and the rest of their inventory they are basically giving away to Google or places like this. And happily, if they could get a check for $10,000 or whatever amount this every month. We also saw an unbalance in the strength between buyer and seller side. This industry, if we talk about digital advertising, has been very, very tech driven. For you listening that have been in this or know this industry, is that it's extremely tech driven. I mean, from an advertiser buying an ad to someone delivering that on a web or a news site or whatever, we can have tens of tech providers taking a cut of the advertising spend, pushed in. So what we saw, with the shift of what I previously mentioned, data privacy, basically third-party cookies going away, we see that the balance here is starting to even up. So the power is more pushed towards the publisher side, since they will be the ones who sit on the first-party data. So our platform basically enables them to capitalize on their first-party data and to set up a direct relationship with their advertisers or agencies or whomever is interested in buying this inventory that they have. And we automate it all the way to an invoice or an end report being sent. So our take here is 100% automation. So as a final clause, thing to add on this, if we talk about the corona or the COVID-19 or whatever we say, it is that when it hit us, as for everyone else, we basically saw a direct freeze of maybe 3 to 4 weeks where nothing happened. After that, we have seen a huge effect on our business. So we have publishers from all over the world contacting us, because what they did was that they lay off all the salespeople. No one was buying, so they lay off salespeople. And what they see now, when the industry is starting to regain slightly, is that they will not take on all of these salespeople back again. So I think that the corona, with the terrible things it brings, it forces publishers to make the decision that they need to transition into self-service and automation. I mean, the publishers that would have died in 1.5 years, they die now, or they make some sort of strategic decision to take control of their assets, which of course is the data and the content they have. So this is shortly what we are up to.
Brilliant. Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Johan?
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Sorry for that professional disappearance. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for outlining what you guys are doing. I just want to move over to you, Sam. If you could just give a very brief background, and then we can go into more detail at a later stage in the session.
Sure, absolutely. I'll keep it short and sweet for you. So I'm the CEO and founder of Gener8 Ads. Very simply, we enable people to control and monetize their own data. We're very, very small. We have had about 80,000 installs in the UK, of which about 40,000 people are daily active. We're growing relatively fast, and I overlap with a lot of the things that we just heard from Johan in terms of shifting power dynamic and obviously the importance of first-party data. Prior to founding Gener8, I worked at Red Bull as part of their global marketing team, most recently in the position of global brand manager where I was personally responsible for 1/3 of their worldwide advertising across all media channels, so TV, radio, print, digital, out of home, emerging media, and so on. So I'm looking forward to a bit of an open discussion and bouncing around some ideas and hearing different people's thoughts and opinions.
Brilliant, brilliant. Andreas.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Andreas Schemm. I'm CEO and founder of Vreo. And what we do is basically we make in-game advertising easy. Vreo acts as kind of the glue between the advertisers and the game developers, and we help both sides find to each other to place basically just ads of various kinds of formats into video games, which is the biggest entertainment industry out there. Myself, I have been involved in startups since the age of 18. With some friends, I founded LaserTag, as tech sport entertainment. If some of you know it, we pushed it to up to 14 venues, multiple million of dollars in revenue. I founded a tournament scene and a community. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to diving a bit more into why people should be advertising in gaming and what the future holds at a later stage.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So, I mean, I just wanted to open up really with you, Johan. You know, you've given a big overview about what Doughnuts is and why you started. But you know, whenever you mention digital marketing, you know, you can't help but think about the duopoly of Facebook and Google. Obviously, you guys are disrupting that. But I'd be really keen to get your view on where you think the future of that dominance is going.
Yeah, sure. I think, I mean, it's as you say, I mean, it's duopoly. I think we are more looking to some sort of triopoly now with Amazon also being part of this this group. And I mean, they have been basically taking care of between 55 and 60% of all the advertising spend from the SMEs. As an SME, this has been the only place where they can buy ads, because all the traditional publishers, they have basically been closed doors. A publisher doesn't want to touch anything, you know, below $20,000-$30,000, because it will cost them $20,000 just to push that campaign through with, you know, all the manual work that needs to be done. You know, it's a very, very inefficient business. But I do believe that the level where this duopoly or triopoly is, it will not grow more. Maybe not due to the reason that they couldn't do it, but I think it's some sort of democratic thing. There are, you know, governments will not allow Google, Facebook to become any bigger than this. I think, I mean, we see it especially in the EU. You know, there is a lot of you know, legislation being enforced, and the reason for this is, you know, to prevent them from getting any more power. On the other hand, if we look at the total advertising budget or spend forecasting over the coming years, now of course we will have a dip, you know, due to the COVID-19, but the advertising spend will grow. So it will open up for other players to basically get the bigger cut of this advertising spend and start to form a relationship also with the SMEs. I mean, the word of, you know, the business for the last year have been that programmatic is dead due to the fact that the third-party cookies is gone. It's almost become some sort of cliche that everyone is speaking about. It is true to some extent. I think advertisers in general want relevance for their ads. So they will go to the places where they can get good relevance. And I think there will be a lot of new players entering that is not just you know, the duopoly or triopoly.
Interesting, thank you. And so, I mean, I think Sam might be able to come in a second about you know, why these third-party cookies are disappearing, as well as what people are doing to safeguard their data. But just another question from me. So are you inferring that it will still be a programmatic approach, still using demand side platforms, supply side platforms, etc., and what you're doing is you're just working with the existing media platforms, so it's almost like they own their own media ecosystem or their own advertising ecosystem? Or do you envisage there being a greater amount of dialogue between media platforms and their customers? As in, do you think it will be still programmatic but a bilateral relationship, or do you see it being one in which you'll see more strategic, relevant advertisement placement on media platforms?
Well, I mean, programmatic as is, I mean, it can be defined more as a business model of how you buy something. You know, you buy it in a more, you know, you place a bid and then you get something. So, but I do believe that there will come a technology change, because this industry cannot continue with all of these tech providers taking a cut of each advertising spend. You know, it will not work if you throw in $100 as an advertiser and the publisher gets 20, you know, and try to deliver something of that. I mean, I don't think that will happen. So I think what we will see is that we will see more and more tech providers that move away from the old style commission-based models and more into fixed license fees.
Interesting.
That is something that I believe will happen. I also do believe that there will be a lot more so-called walled gardens. So basically, you know, unique connections. Basically, how Amazon started off. So start off by having everything closed, and then they open up for strategic partners to come in and act on their market, but on basically the rules are set by Amazon. I mean, what this industry has been with the old programmatic is that it has been the other way around, basically, that publishers opens up and then it's just up for everyone to take it. Of course, you know, they can set some bidding rules and stuff on an SSP, but I think this, coming back to this shift in strength, I think this will definitely have a huge impact on the industry in the coming years.
Interesting. So predictions for the future: a fixed fee based model, and a greater, I guess, a more territorial approach to which platforms will let, I guess, which marketers in, I guess, or which strategic partners to deliver. Thank you. I'm moving over to you, Sam. You know, you introduced Gener8 Ads as a way to help people protect their privacy. Johan referenced the fact that third-party cookies, for many reasons, are no longer as relevant. I guess, I would love to hear your view, because marketing platforms traditionally rely on advanced customer insight, but you're actually taking customers the other direction. You know, is your job to kill digital marketing?
So not at all. Great question, but not at all. So I'm not against the use of data at all. In fact, I mean, we all know, especially from an advertiser's perspective, that accurate and high quality data is absolutely essential for marketeers in order to deliver on their campaigns. So for me, the emphasis is on control. It's rather than privacy. So my belief, very simply, in going a little bit against the grain, is that people should be able to have more control of their data. And I believe that people should be able to share in the wealth that's created from their data. And this is the way that I see the world moving to, albeit in a slightly slow and incremental fashion. But just to touch on an interesting point that Johan made about advertisers wanting relevance in relation to the kind of the duopoly. I totally agree. I mean, I think when I reflect on Google and Facebook, and definitely in the big joint business partnerships that I signed with them while I was at Red Bull, the reason for this as a marketeer, very simply, is because both of them, especially in combination, offer incredible scale and incredible targeting. And right now, others simply can't offer that. nowhere near to the same extent. I mean, forget direct competitors, even entire media channels can't keep up. So for example, TV offers the scale, but not the targeting. Powerful publishers offer the targeting, but not the scale. Out of home claims to offer a mixture of the two, but struggles to validate either one of them. So, I mean, I think when I look at where the world's moving and how the power shifts, or how publishers and others start to claim back a bit of power, I totally agree with Johan. I think outside of regulation, it's very, very hard to imagine a circumstance where advertisers who are fundamentally a little bit lazy are going to opt for a choice of needing to do more work in order to try and reach the same people. So I just wanted to mention that point, because I think it perfectly kind of interweaves with what you were just talking about with Johan.
So just one of the points, and one of the things that I've enjoyed from our conversation in the past is, Red Bull is arguably one of the most sort of seminal brands in terms of recognition globally. And I think you mentioned that you had a pretty significant budget there, and 100 million plus. And it sounds like, so if I ask the same question, if Red Bull started today, do you think their approach to building that brand would be considerably different?
I mean, I think the approach has always been to identify people who we believe will share in the ethos of the business and the company, and to send them relevant messaging, which will basically start that relationship and create it. So whether that is a music audience, whether that is a dance audience, whether it's an extreme sport audience, whether it's Formula One audience. And it's always been about this relevant messaging, relevant targeting, and harnessing the relevant assets. So whether that's an athlete or a sports team or an event. So if anything, I think if you have a sizable budget, the ability to build a brand nowadays is much, much easier than it was previously, because we have access to these platforms where we can target our audiences with the correct messages very, very simply. So, I mean, to use that easy example that I touched on earlier, if you're putting out a TV ad, the only real information you have on demographic breakdowns is seriously broad. You're going by day parting. So what time of day is this showing? What program is it showing before? Who was watching that program? Whereas when I plug in an ad on Facebook, I can choose the audience with so much precision that I can hit my exact people. So, I mean, to answer that question, I would say, if anything, I think there's a big advantage nowadays with the power of targeting, and with the power of targeting at scale. It's a lot easier now than 20 years ago.
Interesting. So I guess my point, just to follow on from a crossover between you and Johan, it seems that Johan is there helping these media owners build these walled gardens to protect themselves, to get hyper relevant people advertising on their properties, etc. Could you say that what you're doing at Gener8 is almost the same, but for the consumer, making sure that they? Yeah,
absolutely. So I come from the other end of the seesaw that we're sitting on between us here. So where I 100% agree with Johan that first party data has always been valuable and is becoming more valuable. I think the eradication of third party cookies is fantastic. I think there's a lot more that can be done, especially when we're looking around kind of fingerprinting and other techniques that companies, media owners, publishers use to track people as they go online. But my fundamental belief is that the data that's accrued on an individual should belong to that individual, and that they should have the ability to share in the wealth that's created from it. So I'll give you a really easy example. Right now, so I'm in North London. If I go to the website of my local council, then just by virtue of clicking on this page and going to this site, 26 different companies have dropped trackers on me. And that's because the council, as the publisher, has allowed this to happen. Now, of those 26 businesses, 7 of them, their business model is as a data broker. So it's their business model to sell on my data and make money from it and give it to others. Now, really simply, when I think about the world and the shifts and the trends, I believe that when people at scale become aware of this inherent tracking and this following that's happening everywhere we go online, because that's not a one-off, that is really happening everywhere with the majority of sites I go to, I believe that people will start to ask questions, and they will say, hang on a minute, if people are selling my data, A, what data are they selling, and B, who's making money from it? And what I believe and what we see is off the back of every data scandal, more people start asking these questions, and they come to the same conclusion. And that's very simply that they want to have more control over their data, and they want to be able to make money from it themselves. So that's why we built Gener8, ultimately to enable people to have a little bit more control and really to be able to share in any wealth that's created from their data. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I think a very noble pursuit. So I mean, but if I understand, you continue to place that premium on your data. But one of the things is, if I understand correctly, you still track your users with their consent anonymously. So I'm guessing that you're generating a considerable amount of insight from that work. And bearing in mind the context of this seminar or webinar is around how COVID has changed things. So I think you mentioned that you'd actually been looking into how your consumers or your customers had changed their habits during this crisis. And I was just wondering, do you have any insights you can share?
Yeah, sure. So just like you said, firstly, we offer people, we tell people this is what's happening, and every time you go to a website, different companies are tracking you. By default, we will stop that, we'll remove the third-party tracking. However, if you would like to opt in, then we will anonymize your data, we'll use it for a research, and we'll share the revenue back with you. So we recently, during the UK lockdown, or a couple of weeks after the UK lockdown, we ran an analysis of just over 31 million page views across 3,600 people in order to identify the changes in online behavior that took place throughout the UK lockdown. And the results were absolutely fascinating. I'm more than happy to share the report with anyone on this call. Just email me afterwards. But I mean, to give some top line stats, we saw there were kind of short-term changes, like the week that the lockdown was announced in the UK, time spent on adult websites increased 292%. We saw that gaming was up 179%. We saw that time spent on personalized gift websites went up 61%, obviously where people could no longer see each other, so they were sending them gifts. We saw that news initially spiked 64% higher than it was, but then within 3 weeks, people started to deliberately avoid the news, and it was 19% lower than the baseline. I know that definitely reflects my own personal behavior, where I was initially hoovering up all the info and I got fed up very quickly. I mean, we also saw some really interesting things with regard to Google searches. So of course, search data shows what people are looking for, it shows what people care about, and it shows what people are fearful of. And we saw a rise in how-to searches, which really illustrated a resilience, practicality, and an empathy from the British people, which was fantastic, because initially we saw people were searching, and all of these terms had the highest ever search volumes that they've ever had. We saw how to work from home, we saw how to homeschool, we saw how to make a face mask, where there was this initial fear of people getting over things, and that very quickly transitioned into searches for how to help and how to volunteer and how to support others. So there were some really touching findings from within the data too. But as I said, it's a relatively comprehensive report. More than happy to share it with people afterwards, because ultimately the companies that will win and that will come out of this stronger are going to be the ones who are able to understand the changes in their consumers' behavior and react and identify which changes are long-term and which are short, and then react accordingly to pivot revenue streams or evolve marketing channels or evolve offerings. So more than happy to share that information.
Brilliant, thanks. Yeah, it's a nice get a sort of picture of I guess the human condition in its entirety. I guess I'd like to move on. You mentioned one stat in there about the increase in gaming. We're fortunate to be joined by Andreas, who is really on the fringes of new media spaces within marketing and ad tech, specifically computer gaming. So Andreas, I guess one question for you is, why did you get into in-game advertising? And I'd love to understand a little bit more about your platform.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, I'm a big gamer myself. That was an easy decision then, because The current format of in-game advertising is very interstitial focused, and that is not something most gamers enjoy. Before I get deeper into it, I want to come back to the question I asked earlier, and that was regarding how much have our viewers and listeners been spending on gaming. And 66% I haven't been gaming last week at all. 25% said maximum of 3 hours, and one person, that was me, said I spent 10 hours or more. So in total, we have like maximum of 10 hours from everybody who answered the survey, which means you are on the other end of everybody else who is gaming, because there are over 2.5 billion gamers worldwide, and the average per gamer is actually 7 hours of gaming per week. This means on this planet, we spend roughly 15 billion hours gaming worldwide every single week. This is more than double of what gets watched on YouTube. And actually, revenues support that claim, because now revenues from gaming are bigger than music and film combined. They're, I think, bordering 150 billion worldwide this year, which is an absolute massive number. But as a gamer myself, I didn't see that many ads inside games, especially not some of brands, which is very astounding. And especially because there are a lot of studies that actually suggest that games and ads are actually very efficient. The brand recall rate rises, the brand perception value rises, if, and that is very important, there's done a right fit. So that means you don't go into a fantasy game. I think most of you have heard of World of Warcraft, which is kind of in a fantasy setting. If you were to advertise cars and Coca-Cola, for example, this would be a big immersion breaker. So that's not a good example. If you were to go to a football game, for example, or a game taking place in a city, then it even can enhance realism, because what you experience in real life is also then what you experience in a gaming world. This means the game is more realistic, and for most people that means it's more enjoyable, because they recall that being the same like in the real world. And in terms of acceptance rates, studies have also shown that gamers like this form of advertising better than most other formats. It's up to 80 to 90% acceptance rates, if again done with a content fit and not just random, and of course not too much placement.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. And I think, you know, it's from what I understand, it's a very nascent field, and so the right fit isn't necessarily a rule book that's been written yet. Just so the audience can get a feel for what you guys do, is it possible? Can you just show us what, for example, what an in-game advert looks like?
Of course. I think I have a video prepared. Not sure. Should I start it myself or?
I think the original plan was for you to share screen, but we do have a video.
I will just start the video. Just a second. I have it here. Can you see it?
Perfect.
Okay, so this is a small scene. Basically, it's a demo environment of an office, and we have set up the screens to basically show various pictures, videos. So we support video, we support images, and also sound. For example, for radio advertising in a game where you drive a car, that's also a possibility. I'm afraid we can't see the metrics very well, but basically we track a lot of stuff. That means we track how big the ad is on the screen, how long it was on the screen, where it was on the screen, was it in the middle, was it in the corner, and stuff like that. And we also track a lot of other metrics, and based on that we then bill. And that is a very fair process. We try to do it as transparent as possible with a high viewability and attribution model. And what we, for example, offer as an opportunity is to utilize blockchain. So we write every single metadata of this ad impression on chain before it goes to our server, and then gets reported and into the dashboard. So there's no possibility of ad fraud, which is a multi-billion-dollar problem as well.
Really, really interesting stuff. So what you know, from your point of view, what do you see as sort of big trends that we'll see in game media? Is this something that is going to blow out proportion? You know, a lot of people have been saying, you know, this is a bit like VR, where, you know, every 5 to 7 years someone says it's going to blow up. What are your views on the future of in-game advertising, and, you know, what would your advice be to a CMO who's looking to engage a gaming audience?
Well, I started out with VR as well, so I'm painfully aware that it hasn't taken off as much as everybody hoped for. With gaming, it's not a question of taking off. Again, it's 2.5 billion people already gaming. Its revenues are immense, and the younger generation, they grow up with games. So this is only getting bigger and bigger, and it's an overlooked medium. Now we are, well, I'm in Germany, so we had quite some restrictions on what we could do and what we couldn't. So this is natural then that a lot of people turned towards gaming more. But there was no solution in place that allowed CMOs to shift, basically to say, okay, if nobody goes out, why do we advertise there? If everybody is gaming, why don't we advertise there? And the answer is straight up, there was no good solution. And that's why we are here and what we are changing. We are offering access for brands and advertisers into games. And we know it's a new territory, basically. So that's why we are here to help. We're not just there for the game developers or for the advertisers. We're in the middle. We help both parties to make better advertisements, basically, for the gamers, and for the game developers to open up a new revenue stream that can help them support and fund their great games. And the funny thing is, with virtual reality as well, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term of the metaverse. So basically, the digital metaverse is the real world crossing over into digital worlds. For example, VR and AR are prime examples for that. Now, it's as festivals are banned, basically everywhere. There are a lot of people who are now trying to do festivals in VR and AR. So you don't miss out on the experience, but you don't have to go out. This is a prime example of something that usually happens in the real world, also happening in the digital world. And a lot of stuff is crossing over and it gains more relevance. There is also VR shopping and VR traveling. 20 years ago, you went to your travel agent and you said, I want to go somewhere, and you hoped he was good and he suggested you something nice. Then came TripAdvisor and the internet, but now you can actually kind of walk where you want to go already. And you can see it and experience it and say, okay, this looks cool. A lot of these programs, though, have a big issue with monetization. So we got approached by 2 or 3 VR platforms who said, we don't know what to do. We need to monetize. We want to offer the content for free, but we can't do the classical 30-second ad interruption like in TV. So immersive advertising, where it's part of the surroundings, but not interrupting the user experience and not ripping the user out of the immersion. That is what we do, and that is why we are prepared for the future. If and when, or rather when, VR and AR really break through, we are there already. Okay,
brilliant. And I'm guessing your advice to CMOs is give you a call and talk about budgets. Before we, well, I'd like to open up to the floor now for questions. But whilst we're waiting for the questions to come in, Johan, I was just going to sort of come back to you, because you're dealing with the enterprise level clients, these big media platforms, and a lot of what you mentioned were sort of around their own properties. But one of the questions is, you've probably dealt with them more recently, where we've seen media income sort of fall through the floor. And I just wondered, what kind of conversations are you having with large scale platforms? What's really sort of, I guess, scaring them, concerning them at the moment, and how can a marketer take advantage of that?
Yeah, so I mean, if you talk about the big tech providers, I mean, I think that there is something needs to happen between the technologies of DSPs and SSPs. I mean, I see a lot of the SSPs looking more towards DSP functionality. So I think that there will definitely come players which basically takes on both hats. So instead of being 2 tech platforms, I think that's one thing that I do believe will come. Also something that is we are looking into. I think from a digital marketeer's perspective, I think what will happen, at least from start now, is that it will be more defragmented. Because if you want to find good data, and also what Sam discussed, in terms of the Google and the Facebooks, you can get a fantastic reach. But if you want to pinpoint then I do believe there is a room for niched publishers that has good content. Because I mean that's basically, I think, one thing that a lot of the old fashion publishers missed out of is that they were so focused on advertising revenue, and they saw print dying, and they believed that, okay, we need to get digital up on the same level, which of course never happened. But they missed the idea of what the publisher is about. It's about creating content that attracts users, and with that you can build up good data set that you should be able to capitalize on. I mean, this is something that we hear from a lot of the customers we work with. I think this is also something that will become very, very important, also not just from the very, very top layer publishers, but also mid-tier and lower tiers. Even though they might not have the big reach, but you know what try to make some good use of their data. If that was answer to your question, or
Well, I mean, so I think that sort of plays perfectly into. Yes, very much so. I was just gonna. It kind of echoes what Sam was saying around. I mean, like it summed up. So if you're a marketer, be less lazy, I believe is the advice, which is, you know, you have to work harder to get those data sets. Sam, I just wondered if you had anything to add on that. I know that you've been in conversations with some media platforms in the UK recently around your product, and just wondering whether you'd heard or you got a barometer on any of their concerns.
Well, I think I'll give a slightly tangential answer, although I would be really interested in hearing from Johan shortly about what the impact is on revenue that he's seen from his publisher clients, not in obviously any names, but ballpark percentages, because of course we've seen all sorts of different data coming from industry magazines about X% decrease, and then Q3 looking good. So Martin Sorrell being very ballsy on thinking it's going to come back quick. However, it would suit his best interests to be pushing that belief. But something separately that I'll mention very quickly is I think it's always worth keeping in mind the holistic bubble that we sit within in terms of the entire marketing ecosystem. So it is worth looking at one of the challenges that global advertising faces right now. And this does slightly play into an advantage that publishers perhaps have above the likes of Google and Facebook. So very simply, if we look at the ISBA, which represents UK advertisers, they released a study which shows that public favorability in and trust towards advertising currently sits at just 25%. So in other words, just 1 in 4 people trust advertising that they see. This is staggeringly low. If we look specifically at influencer marketing, so in particular the likes of Instagram, Facebook, and remember just this week it came out that Instagram for people under the age of 30 is their primary source of news, which again Facebook will be reflecting by jumping and pushing up the CPMs on Instagram very soon. I'm absolutely sure of it. But what this means, so if we look at Instagram and influencers, YouGov's research showed that only 4% of people state that they believe the information that comes from influencers. Now that's staggering. If we put that in perspective, 46% of people believe in ghosts and 16% of people believe in Bigfoot, for God's sake, but only 4% of people believe in the advertising that comes from influencers. So I'm making light of this, but if we rewind just 20 years, then trust in advertising globally sat at 50%. So 1 in 2 people believed the advertising that they were seeing on any medium. So what this shows us fundamentally, and what the CMOs, what everyone's aware of, particularly when we look at the likes of Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Mars, and the big advertisers, is that fundamentally the foundation that of advertising is broken. We know fundamentally that major advertisers need to address this, and we know that the commonality, the thing that's overlapped here, is the enormous growth of the likes of Facebook and Google. And we can see, when you think logically about the things like Cambridge Analytica, about these scandals, that of course this is impacting on how consumers end up engaging with the content and whether they trust it, whether they believe in it. So where I see an interesting opportunity is, as this trust in advertising comes back into focus, which we see every year at Cannes Lion, and Keith Weed last year, the former CMO of Unilever, talked a lot about it. But as we see the big players start to address trust in advertising, I think we'll start to see more tactical media buys. And I think that will go towards, or I hope it goes towards, publishers who have built up a gravitas and have done things the right way. I think we'll see it go towards platforms that consumers trust and that people believe in. And I think we'll start to see money siphon away from these characters who are perhaps acting in a more underhand and shady manner.
Good. All good points. We had a question from Alejandro around how you see the industry in 2021. And I feel like, is it right to sort of assume that your view on it, Sam, is that respectability, platforms that have content that is respectable and trustworthy? Am I right in thinking that you think that these platforms are the ones that will, sort of collect a premium? Yeah.
So I think there'll be a pendulum swing, but it always takes longer than you anticipate. Again, fundamentally, it depends if we're looking at kind of where we're looking at this from. So from an advertising standpoint, companies are playing for quarterly targets. They're playing for year-end results. If they're public, they're playing on their share price. So they're going to be pulling different levers. And ultimately, money tends to go towards things that get the quickest and the fastest results with the least effort and the least hassle. And right now, that is money that's going through Google and Facebook due to that scale and due to that targeting. If we look at the longer term, though, that's where I think we'll start to see this shift in the dial and this movement towards capital heading in the right direction. But I also think if we zoom out 10 years now and we play a longer game, so this is very much my conviction and belief, which is why I founded Gener8. If we look at the big picture of where we'll be in 10 years' time, what I do is I look back 10 years, and let's take a music example because it's a very easy one. So 10 years ago, Spotify hadn't even launched in the US, so they had 0 users. But in January last year, January 2019, the Billboard #1 album in the US only sold physically 823 copies, but it was streamed 83 million times. So within a decade, how music was consumed and how #1 hits were created totally changed. And when I look forward and I look in 10 years in the future, what my belief is that 10 years from now, consumers will have control of their data. They will be able to earn from their data, and brands will have to transact with people to use their data or to show them ads. Now, how the solution is implemented and done and made at scale is totally unknown and up for question. Will it be Gener8? Will it be someone else? I don't know. But I'm absolutely sure that over the coming years, there will be a trickle-down effect where people start to become aware of the value of their data, and they will want to share in the wealth that's created from it. So sorry, long answer, but I hope it helps, Alejandro.
No, I think it's I think there's an op-ed or a thought leadership piece if you haven't written it already. If you have, then please do share it, because I think everything you said there had a very strong, very strong, element of likelihood, or at least it's where I'm completely with you. It's kind of the trends that we're at least seeing, sitting inside a venture arm of a large creative agency. I just want to pull it back for the more sort of information hungry people in the crowd, because one of the questions you had was Johan, the actual percentages in falling in ad spend, obviously without naming names, but in terms of media income, we've seen it collapse. I would love to just understand what you're seeing in terms of percentage change, and then also the same question to you about the industry 12 months out.
Yeah, I mean, our clients are pretty diversified in terms of industry. So of course, if we take there is no secret, we have TripAdvisor, of course, some sort of drop in their ad revenues due to no one traveling or booking hotels. On the other hand, we work with, for example, the OTT industry in the US. They see a tremendous lift. So I think, it's coming back to the percentages and what Sam talked about, the numbers and the effect of what you see. I think that in general, of course, the publisher side has taken a huge hit on the COVID-19. But I do believe that it is just putting something that would happen anyway earlier, because the publishers that aren't set for the future business of managing their advertising business, I mean, they would die anyway. So I think that's what we see. So I mean, for us, we also see some differences in geographical markets. For example, it has what we have at least felt is that parts of Asia hasn't been that affected on the COVID-19 from advertising spend as other parts have been. I mean, if we look at Scandinavia, the hit has been very, very big. So I think looking at different local regions, it differs. I do believe, coming back to what we see, what will happen is that this will force the publishers to take the next step into the future in terms of streamlining and basically moving away. They will be forced to move away from the old way of doing business. I mean, because I think if you look at the publisher, quite similar to what Sam talked about, from the buying side is, I mean, they are extremely focused on their budgets and provisions, all of that. So the will to transform or to think outside of the box is zero. So the only thing they care about is making their budgets, which also makes they haven't taken the opportunity to invest in the basically publisher 2.0 or 3.0. One thing that we do see and that we believe will happen, we see it already, is that we will see companies that hasn't seen themselves as publishers or media owners as a new type of publisher and media owner. It can be mobile carriers, it can be banks, insurance companies, that if we're coming back to the value data, they have this, but they have instead went to their agency and spent 1 billion buying the same audience they already have. So I think this is an area where we will see a huge shift in the next coming years, I think.
Interesting. Before we go to Michael's question around cutting through messaging, Andreas, I just wanted to come across to you because I believe we had a conversation around mobile phone carriers, for example, or mobile phone networks, and sorry, there was I think another lag. If you can hear me, Andreas, I was just commenting on mobile phone networks. I appreciate that we had a conversation the other day about an example of a mobile phone network and how an integration to the gaming space would serve and their benefits. I was wondering if you could share any thoughts on that.
Yeah, of course, happy to. So basically, as most people are probably aware, 5G is on the horizon. Did you get that,
Andreas?
Sorry? Okay, that's good.
Oh.
Yeah, so 5G is on the horizon and continuing to get a bigger thing. So for example, mobile phone companies will want to push that service and push the message out that 5G is available with them. And what better opportunity to make an example of why people should upgrade to 5G. For example, with mobile phones, especially later in the months, depending on your plan, if you play a multiplayer game that's, for example, kind of good looking, has a multiplayer part with a lot of people, then it can be data consuming pretty heavily and pretty fast. And in a multiplayer environment, you don't want to be lagging, as we are experiencing in this call. So this could be a prime example of a messaging where you say, upgrade to 5G now, and never experience lag and have a clearer control over your game. So this would be a good example on an ad that would immediately reach the right people because they're already on mobile phones, and giving them a clear message on why they should upgrade within an interest they already have. This can be, valid for other industries as well, but that is a very good example.
Will.
So maybe we should just pick up on the question of Michael, because we'll say Sam, do you want to go?
I'll pick up on this, Michael. So during quarantine, people spend more time online, therefore can be oversaturated with information.
Brilliant, thank you.
Be a lightweight ad?
So, I mean, I just I wanted to sort of,
Oh, sorry, Will, I think you're catching up with us. I'll take Michael's question very quickly. So, Michael, this is the same, to be honest, the same as it's always been, in the sense that there has always been enormous saturation in advertising. The challenge has always been coupling creative that cuts through to your target audience with a media buy which is relevant for them. The best way to find out what works is to test, and to test at scale. That doesn't necessarily require large budgets, although it depends on the media that you're buying. To use an example of Facebook, very simply, you can take 5 different audiences, you can run the same ad at all 5 audiences to see which it appeals more to. You can then, of course, segment and target different ads to different audiences. You very quickly get the metrics back on what's working and what's not, and you can optimize your budget accordingly. So I would say there's no change there really from an advertiser's perspective. The change though that has come very, very quickly is now the question which advertisers are asking themselves, which is my message relevant given the global events that are happening around us right now? The two, of course, being COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement. As a direct result of this, we've seen some brands stand up and take a great stance, like Ben & Jerry's, like Nike. They're doubling down and putting media buys and creatives into showing how they want their brand to make an impact. For example, Nike ran a campaign saying stay at home and play for the world during COVID. And then as soon as Black Lives Matter came up, they very quickly started running campaigns and ad buys to communicate that they were standing strongly with the Black community on this. So I would, as an advertiser, I'd be asking, are we taking into account these global events that are happening? And is our message still relevant given that? If the answer is no, then pause. You don't need to push your message until you've got a reason to do so. I don't know if Johan and Andreas want to add to that, otherwise someone can pick up the next question.
That was a good answer. So thank you. So next question would be from Luca. What are the main challenges brought by the current crisis? I mean, it depends. Do you mean the main challenges for the whole sector, for us? Because the question, basically, there was another question on the impact of the crisis on the ad industry. If you're asking about what are the main challenges for the ad industry, I think it's the relevance. I think it's standing out, and I think it's identifying the right medium And we see it for a lot of advertisers and advertising agencies that they have announced that they are missing like 40% of their spend, basically. So ad spend can be down, and especially in certain things, they can be down. And I think that is one of the main challenges, to just identify the right audience. That is always a challenge, but now even more, and to identify the right medium and not just get stuck in a loop, basically get content and say, okay, I do what has always worked, because in this time, it doesn't. You have to adapt, you have to change.
So I'll just add to that very quickly. On Monday, I was doing a podcast with Jim Stengel, who was the former chief marketing officer of Procter & Gamble, so biggest advertiser in the world when he was there. And what we talked about as a very generic response with regard to the challenge that's been brought is that all businesses, so I'm answering this because I saw a lot of founders tick the box at the start of the call, all businesses ultimately need to do three things right now. And that's they need to respond, they need to rebuild, and they need to recover. They respond by cutting costs, by furloughing staff or losing staff, and by putting out fires. They rebuild by revisiting their fundamentals, by understanding what's changed about their consumer or their customer, and by adapting their business as necessary. And then they recover by implementing new revenue streams, by implementing different marketing approaches, and ultimately by maintaining their growth. Right now, about 3.5 months into this, I can't believe how fast it's gone, but about 3.5 months in now, most businesses are at the rebuild stage. So they've got through that initial panic moment of cutting costs. Most opted to cut costs very deeply and very quickly, so they only had to do it once. And now they're rebuilding, like Johan said, having conversations with publishers, understanding what they're doing to try and increase their revenue. Most businesses are looking at diversifying revenue streams. And this is ultimately the similarity that all businesses have. The flip side to this is I was with a founder the other day who founded an online dating business, and they're absolutely surging. So there are, of course, companies that benefit from this. But on the whole, I think people need to respond, they need to rebuild, they need to recover, and you guys need to reflect on your own companies and see what you're doing in that.
Yeah, I think, one thing that we have seen from some of our clients is that they basically give away, so they use the COVID-19 to give away inventory for free, of course, because it's not sold out, but to make some sort of positive impact on this. So they open up their inventory, but they don't do it through the programmatic way. They do it in a direct relationship with the advertisers to hopefully, create some relationships that they can utilize after, when the business comes back.
There's one thing I want to add, and that is that I've heard it before, and I would agree that COVID-19 has been like an accelerator. Stuff that was already going on is now pushed even further. So there was one meme I liked where it was like, what led to digitalization of your business? Was it the CEO, the CTO, the CIO, or was it COVID-19? And I think for AdTech, this is kind of true as well, because a lot of stuff is going to change probably in the long run. Some companies have said everything is going to be work from home. Some have extended it. Some have said this can stay on forever. So that would mean, for example, less traveling. So I think it's just getting faster, the cycle and which stuff changes, which means that AdTech will also change, and trends that have begun will get there faster. Sorry. Shall I just read the question? Do the AdTech clients want to get some off for the advertisements through this COVID period? How do vendors relate to such requests? Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can. We haven't seen any, discussions related to this. I think, as stated from before, a lot of if we look at the tech that is part of the value chain of managing this, is based on commission. So if there is no money coming in, there is no revenue for the ad tech providers. But I think, as Sam said, what we see with our customers is that, I mean, they are in a rebuild, so they are now, you know, thinking about. They are forced to stop, think, and say, okay, how can we change what we have for future? I think that this is we get a lot of invites from our customers to have these discussions, to discuss how we can improve and efficient. Because I mean, we are, even though we struggle a bit, you know, internally in where to put us. Are we AdTech? Are we MarTech? Or what are we? I mean, we are more an enabler that hooks up the technologies that needs to be hooked up to automate the process. I mean, this is what we do. So I mean, and we, of course, we want to hook up as few technologies as possible. And we are very much in this looking at, I mean, the publishers, they are our customers. So we're on their side. So we try to see it from the bigger picture. How can we make it better for them on the long term, and also, you know, to be scalable? And that, I mean, it impacts everything from their financial reconciliation, of their reporting, on basically all aspects. One thing that we have seen the last, I mean, from beginning, we more or less, we got the piece of the inventory. Okay, we can put this inventory on the self-serve, and then, you know, the rest we will do. What we see now is they want us to look at 100% of the inventory, not just one part of it, but the whole, and to see how we can streamline and make it more efficient. And I think it will be less AdTech providers, or at least as they have been. There will, of course, come new ones, but there will be a lot of the AdTech providers going down the drain.
Definitely agree with that. I think coming back to the point Johan made right at the start, which is the cost of media right now, and the erosion of media in the value chain. So that £1 being spent, with only 20 to 30% of it, 20 to 30p actually going on the media buy, and everything else just getting eaten by these middlemen. This chain, and also the lack of transparency within the chain, has always been on the radar for marketeers, but due to other priorities, it tends to get kicked down the road where they don't focus on the inefficiency. Instead, they push their media agency for a bigger discount, or instead they push Facebook for a better discount on a joint business plan. But what you see as times get a little bit tougher, as they inevitably will do in the UK as we head towards what's bound to be a recession, and globally very likely to head into a global economic drop, what will happen is chief marketing officers will start to look at where they can make efficiencies. And one of the easiest places to make an efficiency will be, who can we kick out of this chain? So just like Johan said, I think we'll see some of these middlemen are either getting knocked out, and as a consequence, potentially going bust. I think at the same time, with third-party cookies and these changes that are also happening, that plays into the fact that some of these vendors should be no longer relevant. And I definitely think that there will be a kind of coming together and a centralization of less players doing more to try and make the media buy go further. And then coming into your next question, Jacob, with which social channels are most popular during COVID-19, TikTok, Facebook, Insta, Twitter. This depends on who the advertiser is and what audience they're trying to reach. It's totally different depending on if I want to reach an 18-year-old male versus a 36-year-old female versus a 60-year-old man. I'm going to be looking at different media buys. In general, the cost of media has decreased enormously. So for companies who are cash rich, or for big companies, it's a fantastic time to buy up media. It's a fantastic time to run advertising and to run campaigns, because we've seen the cost of media drop. And consequently, when we were just talking with Johan about what's the percentage decrease in publishers' revenue, that means there's deals to be had, and advertisers know it. Now's the time where if you do have the budgets, you double down on them, because we all know from the research that brands who can continue to spend throughout a recession will come out of the other side faster and stronger than brands who turn off advertising. The reality, though, is that if you're an SMB, a small or medium-sized business, you might not be able to continue advertising because your revenue's probably dried up. And if you do advertise, you might not make it to the other side. So that's why we'll see the big guys continue and potentially pump in the same amount or perhaps even more. And we'll see all of the smaller guys, the long tail, will dry up. And that's what we've seen now with the very quick switch off in advertising from SMBs. But actually, if you look at the conglomerates outside of the verticals like travel and the ones you'd expect, there hasn't really been an increase or decrease in spend. And then I'll just tie up the last question because it's an easy one from me personally. Yes, my team, we went remote before the UK lockdown. So on March 16th in the UK, a lockdown was announced. On March 1st or 2nd, it was optional to work remotely. And we've all been doing that since then.
So for us, it was kind of similar. I mean, we're a small team, so it was a bit easier than I expect for an 80 plus people company. But we switched to work from home a long time ago, like at the beginning of last year. And it has been great for us. And the reasoning being was that we are actually spread pretty far and wide. So yeah, for a couple of people, we don't need an office. We are a digital company anyway, and everything gets puzzled together in a digital environment. So yeah, for us, it was super easy because we did it already and we don't regret it. And I don't think we will go back to office that soon.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's the same, even though we are but our whole business is based on, remote work. Also our deliveries. I mean, we have clients on the West Coast, Los Angeles, New York. I mean, we of course, we used before COVID, we traveled there, more from sales perspective, but all the work we do is remote. So I think for us, it's business as usual.
Brilliant. Well, assuming my voice cuts in a relatively timely manner, I just want to bring the panel to a close because we're almost out of time. Just for a start, thanks, guys. It's good to have 3 leaders or professional leaders on the panel to sort of taking charge and basically picking up the slack when the lag has kind of killed my ability to moderate. So first of all, a huge thank you to you guys for keeping the conversation going and smashing out some great answers. From my perspective, there's quite a few things to take away from this. So thank you for all of your input. So, first of all, Johan, with your sort of comments around media owners sort of having walled gardens, more control over who they're selling their data to and sort of owning more of that relationship. We then had sort of Sam who came in and said, actually, the consumers are also doing the same and taking more ownership of their data and how they get targeted to. Sam then raised a really good point around marketers being a bit lazy, which Johan actually then sort of came along and sort of highlighted a bit more that, the data sets are a premium and getting beta data sets, they're out there. If you can find them, that will be an advantage. Your view on the future, Sam, resonated quite strongly. Truth is a premium. So we'll see a pendulum swing towards reliable media outlets in the future. Just on the current crisis, we heard that prices are down across the board, but obviously some customers are hit more than others, particularly obviously the travel sectors, or as you'd expect. We had new companies that aren't currently being media companies will switch into the media space, so phone networks, etc. We had a really good view into gaming as a media frontier. And sort of finally a big sort of push for now's a great time to buy media. It's going cheap. So I just want to say sort of a massive thank you to all of you. A huge thanks to everyone who answered the question and for bearing with us during the technical issues. So a big thank you for me and back over to you, Alexandra.
Thank you, Will. Thanks so much for managing the great discussion, even in such bad conditions, bad network conditions, I mean. Thank you, guys. I guess we had a really brilliant discussion, very interesting questions, and thanks for sharing your amazing experience. And of course, I have to say thank you to our partners, Zag and Sigma Software Labs, and to all of our attendees today. And welcome to our next webinar, which will be held the next Thursday, and will be dedicated to the fundraising in the uncertainty. So have a great evening, everybody, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.